Welcome to the Prairie State Wire podcast. I'm Brian Hyde. Today I'm joined by Erika Sanzi, who is the Senior Director of Communications at Defending Education. But Erika, that's only telling part of the tale. You have actually been involved in education for a long time. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then let's talk about an issue that Illinoisans need to know about.
Sure. So I am a mother of three sons who are now 16, 18, and 20. So I have the experience of a parent. My kids have attended, local district schools. They've attended a charter school in the area, and they also attended parochial high school. But I also was a member of the NEA, America's largest teachers union, in two states, sort of back in the late 90s, early 2000s, before my chapter of motherhood started. So I was a teacher, and I worked in Massachusetts and California. And if you take together all of my time working in schools, it was about a decade, both before and after I had my kids. And then I've been in education advocacy now for actually over a decade as well.
And specifically, one of the things we want to talk about with you today is the push for mental health screenings for kids in Illinois. Walk me through what the proposal was and how did this become, the law where who's pushing for these mental health screenings for kids?
That's actually a good question. Certainly in the case of in Illinois, we saw the governor way out front, bragging about these, again, mental health screeners. And people need to understand that every single child, regardless of symptoms, would be screened starting in the third grade. So we're talking about unlicensed people screening asymptomatic children with mental health screeners in a public school setting. And again, I think that a lot of the people who push this kind of stuff think that it's the right thing to do. I don't think that most people involved in these kind of interventions that seek to almost pathologize childhood, I don't think that they have nefarious intentions. I just don't think that these are good for kids. And I certainly don't think that the people involved are qualified to be doing this. And I also think that, because that there are some children struggling with mental health issues, I don't think that there's any justification for now making it the default for all students, to answer questions about subjects that there's a good chance they haven't thought about, aren't on their radar. They're perfectly fine. And now you've given them things to potentially ruminate over that they wouldn't have if you hadn't initiated these screeners in the first place.
And Erika, that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask is what exactly are they looking for in these kids? What is this supposed to seek out?
If memory serves, I haven't seen a copy, I don't think, of these. But what we have seen across the board is just increasingly intrusive questions in a school setting of children younger and younger. So I don't know exactly what is going to be in these screeners. People that live in the area probably have a better sense. But what I do know is that we're seeing, a lot of sensitive topics show up on questionnaires and surveys and potentially in these screeners for young children about issues that are, first of all, they're very values laden. They're also private in many cases. And so to me, the thing that we see a lot of is around suicidality, sexual orientation, gender. They ask about different situations in the home. They ask about the politics of your parents. Again, I don't know what these are going to ask about. But again, to me, it's like, if you're really, really looking for something, you're often going to find it. And when you're screening asymptomatic children as the default, you're going to have so many false positives. It's like you make the situation worse because you sort of like drag children who are healthy and fine into this world of sort of like obsessing about oneself and obsessing about one's feelings. Just something that happened nearby me. This is an anecdote from a parent, and he's also a teacher. And he gets a frantic phone call from his son's school, elementary school. They need to rush down there because their child, is showing red flags for suicidal ideation. And it turns out that a bunch of these kids who play hockey had all been exhausted from getting home really late from practice or a game the night before. They get asked a bunch of questions by some, again, unlicensed person. And because they're just kind of like tired and just like not in a great mood, all of a sudden parents get called to the school and are told before they get there that their child might want to commit suicide. That's insanity. But again, right, because like they're looking for something, and suddenly this like young, exhausted boy doesn't give them what they want, and it turns into a whole thing that it never should have been, because they shouldn't have been asking them the questions in the first place.
Well, and Erika, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but mental health seems like it can be kind of a nebulous term. That could cover a lot of different things. And as you point out, maybe introduce these young kids into ideas that they wouldn't have even gravitated towards. And there's also the idea too that, well, if you do have one of these maladies, there's a sense of victimhood, which is kind of worn, as a crown, by some.
Oh yeah, no, what ends up happening is they pathologize everything. So now you're shy, you can't be shy, it has to be something else. You can't be nervous about an upcoming, test or something big happening. You can't be nervous because that also has to have some sort of name. You can't be sad today. You can't be disappointed. So you can't be hyper. So I just think that, again, like, there are very real things that face children in this sort of world of mental health. We know that anybody that has worked with children that have severe behavioral disorders, severe mental health disorders, children that have had to be inpatient, it's not that those aren't real. It's that, yet again, as with so many other things, they're now expanding this out to everybody. They're making it sort of like a universal responsibility to get into the heads of other people's children. And again, if there's no red flags, if you're talking about asymptomatic children, why in the world would the school think that it is their role to be tinkering in the minds of asymptomatic children in a public school setting? It's just, to me, it's a certainly government overreach, for one. I mean, it's just not appropriate. But the other thing I would say is that I think, again, these practitioners who push all of this and compare them, they'll say, well, we do eye screenings, we do hearing screenings, and they're trying to say that it's no different than that. Well, of course, it's very different than that. That's ridiculous. Those are objective measures. Those are not, somebody deciding to use their judgment and decide that a kid who's tired after hockey practice might want to commit suicide. So it's a ridiculous comparison. But again, like, I think that a lot of people who work in this world think that this is good for kids, but all of the evidence tells us that it's not helping kids, it's hurting kids. And if you look, the more that they've pushed, whether it's screeners, whether it's social emotional learning, whether it's making kids, talk about their feelings every day at the start of class or the start of homeroom, not only is there no evidence that levels, of depression or anxiety or whatever they want to call it, that those are being reduced, but they're on the rise. And I'm not surprised. I think when if you're pushing kids to sort of obsess inside their minds and think about themselves all the time, how do I feel? How is this making me feel? What is my reaction to what this person said or this person did, rather than focus themselves outward. The most joyful people are the people who focus outward, and the most unhappy people are the people that can't get outside of themselves. And I think that, again, these screeners and this messaging for kids, I think it sets them on the road of a very bad habit that does not lead to happiness. And that is sort of, ruminating about yourself in your own head all the time.
What options do parents have in terms of opting their kids out of these screenings?
I know that there are official ways to opt out of these screenings. This is the same with a lot of the surveys that we see in school. And I would tell people that they should look into how to do that. It should be easy to find. I know there's an organization in Illinois called Awake Illinois, and they have those forms right on their website. But again, if you had asked me 15 years ago if I'd be opting my kids out of all these things given in school, my answer would have been no, because at that time they weren't crossing these lines. They weren't, asking questions that were not only inappropriate, but like were introducing ideas that young kids weren't even aware of yet. Or again, that the outlier kid might be, but most aren't. Now it's everybody's problem. But parents have a right to opt out. Certainly with the mental health screeners, they've stated that they have the right to opt out. And speaking for me as a former educator and as a parent of 3, I would opt out of these in a hot second.
No, it's good to know that those options are there, but
And that's a federally guaranteed right. That opt-out for parents is guaranteed under federal law. A lot of school board members, a lot of administrators and teachers, they don't know that because for some strange reason, it's never taught to them in any of their preparation programs. But parents do need to know that, again, if their kids are being given surveys, screeners, et cetera, they have a right to opt out. And if that opt-out mechanism has not been shared with them by the school district, they should ask for it because it has to be provided.
Erika, where do residents of Illinois go from this point, though, to make sure that there are proper boundaries in place between what, educators, even well-intentioned educators, who may want to do these mental health screenings, that would keep them out of places where they really shouldn't be? Is there any move toward that?
I mean, there is power in numbers. And what I have found over time is that a lot of people in the public, just sort of like regular busy people, they might hear the word mental health screener and think, well, that sounds kind of like a good thing. But then when they have a sense of what it really is, or then when they have a sense of where it's coming from, or perhaps after they have a conversation with somebody like me, they might say to themselves, yeah, I don't really know how I feel about this. So one thing is the educating of parents. It's the awareness piece, because once you have more awareness, you're going to have more people that are going to agree with you and they're going to be opposing and objecting to this. The other thing is it's very difficult to oppose or object to initiatives like this when you're by yourself, because you're going to take a lot of heat and a lot of criticism. But when there's power in numbers, and what you realize too is the objections don't usually break down along political lines the way people expect them to. Oftentimes it's just a parent takes the time to learn about it and they're like, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't think that we need that. So I would say learning more about it, finding other people who are like-minded, objecting in larger numbers if you can, whether that's sending a lot of emails to a school board member, sending a lot of emails to the school district, reaching out again to organizations like Awake Illinois, who have done deep dives on these bills, on these laws, on these screeners, and they have resources to help parents who either want to learn more or who've decided they want to opt out but don't know how.
Okay. Is there a website that you can direct people to if they would like to get on board?
So if you're talking Illinois specific, are we talking Illinois specific? I would definitely recommend Awake Illinois. I think it's awakeillinois.org. I would have to double check that. So if people put Awake Illinois in a search bar, they'll find it. In fact, they're doing much better work on this than my organization because we're national. So we're not as focused on this one. We're very focused on intrusive surveys broadly, and we're focused on screeners like this more broadly. But for families that are just in Illinois, I was just actually over the weekend with Shannon Adcock, who runs that organization with 2 other people. And they're experts on this. And that's where I would send everybody to go if they want to, again, understand, learn more, opt out. The forms are right there. And certainly too, if they had questions, they could reach out to that group and they would be able to, get in touch with the 3 people who run that organization.
Well, Erika, thanks for doing your part to help get the word out. Again, we're talking with Erika Sanzi. She is the Senior Director of Communications at Defending Education. Thank you again for joining us here on the Prairie State Wire podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.